setting up the development environment for our chatbot that we want to build. We focused on installing Visual Studio. We also focused on installing the Python package, the Python programming language. So in this video, we're actually going to focus on installing the Python packages that we're going to use in order to develop our chatbot, and also to create a test chatbot in order to prove that our packages are accurately working as they should. So without wasting much of your time, let's begin. So first of all, I would like you to log into your Twilio account. Just type Twilio in your favorite browser. It opens up. Click on console or login, then put your email and password, and then you are logged into Twilio. So this is the likely page that you are going to see. So secondly, you may be asking, how are we going to develop this chatbot? How is it going to communicate, like for example our code with Twilio and WhatsApp? So basically what Twilio does, it understands the language of webhooks. So Twilio actually works with webhooks in order to communicate between our web application or our chatbot and Twilio and WhatsApp. So what am I saying? I'll give an example here, since we're going to use Twilio. So I have drawn some fun illustrations here. So let's pretend this is actually the user, which is you. This is the WhatsApp application that you're actually going to use. This is Twilio right here. And then this is our chatbot code. So what happens is, for example, a user sends a message saying hi to WhatsApp here. And then when it sends hi to WhatsApp here, so WhatsApp doesn't even know, like the WhatsApp number doesn't even know what to respond to this user who just said hi. So what is it going to do? What it's going to do is that it's going to ask Twilio, saying, there's a user who actually said hi, what am I going to do? Twilio is going to say, oh, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do. Let me ask the code base, which is our web server, which is our code, which is actually running. And then it will ask our code, okay, a user just said hi, how am I supposed to respond? The code will actually look in itself, and it finds maybe a method that is actually defined to handle the request of hi, and would say, okay, here it's actually defined, if a user says hi, you should respond with how are you. So Twilio receives the how are you, and then once Twilio receives the how are you, it's now going to use what is called a webhook in order to send this response to the WhatsApp application, and then the WhatsApp application actually delivers this to the user. So this whole flow, what makes this possible? What makes it behave like this? This falls under what is known as a webhook. So basically a webhook is just a way of interacting, it's just a way of promoting interaction between different components, like components which are actually not supposed to work together. You can actually make them work together using a webhook. So a webhook is actually responsible for channeling this message from the web application, the web server, to Twilio, and then from Twilio to WhatsApp, and the other way around. So this is basically what we call a webhook. So I think we'll see the action of webhooks as we go through the tutorial. So how are we going to actually develop our chatbot? So we will need different Python packages which will allow us to work on this chatbot. So first of all, the package that we're going to focus on first of all is the Twilio standard library, and this library will be responsible for the communication between our code, our Python code that we're going to write, and Twilio. So it will actually be able to connect us, or to connect our code to Twilio third-party service. So we are going to install the Twilio Python library, and then we are also going to use Ngrok or Ngrok, depends on how we are going to pronounce it. So how Ngrok works, Ngrok will actually allow us to create a custom webhook. For example, since this chatbot is going to be run on a local server, that is the development server that we're going to use, so we're actually going to utilize the power of Ngrok. It's actually a software. So Ngrok, what it does, it actually forwards our local traffic into an online web server. It actually turns our local development environment into an online working environment, and it generates a URL which we will use as a webhook since we are developing locally. And also, what are we going to use as a saver? So basically we have two choices. We can actually use Flask, which is actually a Python framework for developing web applications, or we can actually use Django. So the difference in this, in terms of developing chatbots, is that Django is a bit complex to set up. We'll show you also how to develop chatbots using Django, of which Flask is actually straightforward, especially for this basic training. We're going to use Flask to develop our chatbots. It's straightforward, doesn't have all the nitty-gritties, so we are going to utilize the power of Flask in this development. So the Python packages that we need, we actually need the Twilio Python package, and then we also need the Flask web framework so that we can actually run our code as a web saver. And then we are also going to need the request package. So what is this request package that we're talking about? From the name you can actually hear requests. It helps us in requesting something from the internet. For example, you are requesting a page. Maybe when you see later in the course, when you're actually working with fetching information from remote APIs, you actually make use of this requests package from Python. So Python is actually an interpreted language. It highly depends on libraries. So these are the libraries that we're going to focus on. So I think let's begin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to my folder. So I've created a folder, Bootcamp Lecture 3. I'm going to create a folder for our project. So I'm going to call it WhatsApp. Press enter. And then once I've developed this, so if you've actually installed Visual Studio Code and actually tagged add to context menu, what you can actually do is just right click on your folder that you just created, maybe on desktop, maybe in documents, and then just click on open with code. Or you can just fire up Visual Studio Code here and then just go on file and then open folder and then select your folder. So it's actually the same thing, it just depends on what you want to do. So on this development purpose, we're actually going to utilize what are called virtual environments. So you may ask, what are actually virtual environments in the first place? So virtual environments are actually isolated environments from the actual original environment. So why are we actually going to use virtual environments? So when you're actually installing these Python packages, these are packages usually developed by the community, developed by different organizations. So we actually don't know what these packages consist of, for example, in terms of bugs and stuff. So we don't want to mess up our Python installation package, our whole Python installation package. So instead of messing up our Python installation package, we actually create an isolated environment where we are going to create all our project in. So we install these Python packages in an isolated environment such that we can not even affect our Python installation. So I'll show you how to do that. So since we've right clicked and opened it, I'll close this. So this is shows the folder which you actually just opened. So in order to create a virtual environment, which is an isolated environment, fire up your new terminal. Just click on terminal and then click on new terminal. Wait for it to show up. So everything we're going to actually execute it in a terminal. So I'm using bash. For example, I've actually installed a software called Git Bash, but if you are not using bash, you would see something different. Like you would see something like PowerShell or a command prompt. But I recommend to use either bash or the default command prompt. If you don't see command prompt popping up, just click on this down arrow and then select command prompt. So this is what you're likely to see. So how to create a virtual environment? You're just going to copy this code, type in Python -m virtual environment, which is symbolized by VNV, and then the name of your virtual environment. So I'll call it WhatsApp. Press enter and wait for it to create a virtual environment for you. So wait for it. As you can see, it has actually created a folder called WhatsApp here. So this is actually our virtual environment being developed. It's actually creating different files into this folder structure. So let's wait for it to finish creating the virtual environment. Okay, so for time's sakes, and not to make this video long, I'll pause the video for a while until the virtual environment is actually finished setting up. Okay, so our virtual environment is actually finished to set up. So how are we going to start using our virtual environment? So what you're going to do is actually we need to activate it. So you may ask, how are we going to activate our virtual environment? So what you do, if you're using bash like me, what you're going to do is go to source, say source, right, and then the name of the virtual environment that you created. So that's hotspot, and then backslash, and then scripts, which is this folder right here, and then backslash activate. Sorry, let me check what's going on. So let me try again. Source hotspot, sorry, it's actually /scripts /activate, not backslash. Okay, so as you can see, we've actually activated the virtual environment. It now shows us we are now using and utilizing the virtual environment. And then if you are using cmd command prompt, what you're going to do is just pass in the name of the virtual environment that you just created. Mine is hotspot, as you can see from here. So I'm going to type in hotspot and then backslash scripts and then backslash activate. As you can see, we have now activated the hotspot virtual environment. So as we actually mentioned earlier, to be able to connect to Twilio so that we can actually utilize the WhatsApp API, we need to install the Twilio Python package. So the way you install Python packages is actually using the command called pip for every Python package that you install. So we want the Twilio Python library. So what you say is just pip install Twilio and then just press enter. Wait for it. Okay, so it will be downloading and installing the package. It's now installing the collected packages. So let's wait for it. Let's wait for it to finish. So this Python package will actually enable us to actually connect to Twilio and actually utilize the WhatsApp API. So whilst it's finishing installing, what I need you to do, remember, we need to actually create what is called a webhook. So this webhook will actually allow the communication between our chatbot and the Twilio third-party service and also the WhatsApp API. So we are going to use Ngrok. So fire up your browser, open the tab and then type Ngrok and then just press enter and then just click on the first link to download Ngrok. Wait for it. So Ngrok allows you to create a webhook, but it's actually limited in terms of time. If I actually remember, it actually gives you like about 1 hour 30 minutes for you to actually utilize your webhook. So if you actually want more than an hour to utilize the webhook, I suggest you actually create an account on Ngrok so you can actually log in or sign up for Ngrok. So I recommend you actually sign up for Ngrok so that you actually get a lot more time for Ngrok. And click on sign up and then just click up sign up with Google account if you have a Google account, and then sign up with GitHub if you have a GitHub account, or just do the basic sign up. Then after you have signed up, actually you can actually use it without even signing up, so it's actually up to you. So if you don't want to go through this process of signing up, this process of everything, what you can just do is just click on download here. So it's up to you, either you sign up, either you don't sign up, it doesn't matter, it will still work. So yeah, it will still work. So if you're on a Windows machine, just click on download. So I've already downloaded Ngrok, and I'll show you how to set it up. So you just hit on download here, and it will download a zip file. So close it out. Okay. So this is actually the zip file that you download, for example, for Ngrok. It's actually zipped. So what you have to do is actually extract it from the zip file, and then you'll see actually a software which you actually execute in order to create our webhook. Remember, a webhook will allow us to connect third-party services together, and it will actually forward our traffic from a local development environment to an online environment. So what you need to do is actually extract this Python package, this Ngrok. So I'll click on extract Ngrok stable, wait for it to extract. Okay, it's actually extracted. Go in. As you can see, it's just a package which is actually here. So I'm actually going to execute this Ngrok package. What I want you to do, if you're on a Windows machine, just click on Shift and then right click, and then it will show you open command prompt window or open CMD, or you can actually see open in Windows Terminal, anything, or open PowerShell, anything that you want. I will click on open in Windows Terminal, or click open CMD. So we'll leave it for now, so it actually open in this folder. So let's leave it. Let's go back to our code. Okay, so it has actually finished installing. So now what you're going to do is actually start the development. So remember, we said in order to develop we need a framework which will actually act as a web server. So we've actually chosen Flask, which is also a Python framework. So how are we going to install Flask? We're going to say pip install Flask, hit enter and wait for it to install. So it's now installing Flask. So Flask will actually act as our web server for this development purposes. So prepare to see magic, prepare to see wonders. Okay, so Flask is actually finished installing, so it's time to create our bot. So what I want you to do, since you are using VS Code, I want you to right click on this virtual environment that you actually created, depending on the name that you put, and then just click on new file. And then I want you to create a file called app.py. So .py is actually an extension which shows we want to create a Python file. So it's actually activating extensions for Python, as you can see right now, discovering Python interpreters. So as you can see, it is actually indicated we are actually in a virtual environment called Hotspot. So first of all, we have to actually import the packages that we actually installed in order to utilize them or in order to use them. So what you are going to do is use the keyword from. So it's actually a Python keyword that we utilize if you want to say we want to utilize a specific packages method. So we're going to say from Flask, and the Python package that we actually installed called Flask, we want to import Flask, comma, and then request. So we are saying from the Flask package that we actually installed, we want to import a method called Flask. So this method, we actually use this method in order to create our own web server, and then this request parameter will allow us to get the text that the user sends from WhatsApp. You'll see it in action in a bit. And then remember, we actually installed the Twilio package, so we actually have to import it. So we say from, and then we have to say Twilio dot Twilio. So where can you find all the stuff that I'm writing? So if you actually go to the Twilio website, you can actually see they'll give you an example of how to integrate Twilio with Python. So you can say from twilio.twiml.messaging underscore messaging response import messaging response, which is actually a function. The good thing about this is actually the fact that you won't need to actually repeat it. So every time you're actually creating a bot, you actually use the same structure again and again and again. So you actually just copy and paste code from the different bots to another bot. So that's the beauty part of it. And then now we actually have to instantiate this class so that we can actually make it active as a web server. So what we say now is actually app, or any, or I can call it even main, or anything. You can call it bot, so I'll call it app is equals to, and then now we actually have to instantiate our class, which is Flask in bracket underscore underscore name underscore underscore. So we are now saying run this Flask as a web server, this Flask framework as a web server, and assign it to a variable called app. Okay, I think that's clear. And then now, how are we going to actually notify our app that it's actually working? So we need to create what are called routes or routes or anything that you want to call them. Basically, this is actually URLs that you see. For example, this is actually a route. So we need to actually create our own routes. So how do you create own routes in Flask? You just say app.route and then colons, and then this is where you define a route. For example, if you put a slash, it will say if a person doesn't provide anything as a route, this is what should happen. So we actually have to define a method for this route. So you have to pass in the method's argument and say it is equals to, and it will ask you actually the method that you want to do. So we actually pass them as a Python list. Don't worry if this is this nitty-gritty stuff is actually confusing you. Just follow along. I will explain it as we go. And also there's a Python course which is actually coming, which will be constructing and teaching soon, so you will get everything. And then so we're saying these methods, it can actually accept get parameters and also post parameters. So we have actually defined what is called a route. So under this route, how is it going to handle anything? Of course, we've actually defined a route. So what is this route going to do? So we actually define what is called a method, which actually goes under this route. So how do you define a method in Python? You just use the define or def, and then actually write the method that you actually want for it to define. So I'll call it hello, or let me just call it bot. Right, you can actually define bot as a method and then put a colon and press enter. As you can see, Python deals with spaces, it doesn't deal with the semicolons. And then here you will now write all the logic of your bot. So let's say writing logic of bot. Okay, so how do we actually make sure our server is running properly? We actually need to export the Flask application. So how do we do that? We actually say if underscore name underscore the one that we defined here, right, as you can see, is equal to, and then also put colons underscore main underscore, and then what is actually going to happen about it? We are going to run our application, which is app.run. So this is just basic framework. So you may ask, where am I actually getting this stuff? So if you actually search Flask documentation, then click on the Flask here, you actually see a lot of interesting stuff. So it's just a basic framework. So let's just go to quick start. As you can see, this is actually the basic framework for using a Flask application. So you can actually utilize it in any of your code, okay. So let's proceed. Okay, so here we're going to actually run the logic for our application. So first of all, what we need is to actually get what the user is actually said in the pod. So for example, the user is actually sent a message called hi. So how do we do it? First of all, we create a variable for storing the message. So we'll call it msg for message is equals to requests. See, we're now using the request from the Flask package, and then dot form. So take this form as that dialog box, it's that text area that you actually write a message in WhatsApp application dot get. So we are requesting what is in the form and we want to get it. So in brackets, so what do we want to get? So we want to get text that is actually available in the form. So we write body, so it's actually a function here. And then we need to actually create an instance of a response so that we can be actually able to respond to the user. So what I'm going to do, so I'll call it response, in short for resp, is equals to messaging response. If we get any errors, we're going to solve them together. So this will actually create an instance of this messaging response. This will actually allow us to be able to respond to the user with the appropriate response. So now to write the logic, we're actually going to use what are known as control statements. So what are control statements? So control statements are if and else statements. I'll give an example. You might say if it's cold, you have to wear a jacket. If it's hot, you have to remove a jacket. So that's the same with control statements. That's what we're going to utilize. So don't worry about all the nitty-gritty stuff. We're going to use this process in the next lectures, in the next tutorials. So we're going to explain everything about Python variables. We're going to explain everything about Python methods, how to define a method. And we're also going to explain everything about all these tags, all these methods, the post and the get. And then also all these Python packages. We're going to explain everything. So it's actually going to be a tutorial on Python just to get you up and running with Python. So we're going to say if msg, so if the message that you actually receive from the user, that's what you are saying. Remember, we've actually passed it here. msg is equals to request.form.getBody. So if the message that we receive from the user is equal to, we actually use a double equal sign, equal to hi, what are we going to respond with? So hashtag response. So this is actually a comment. So we're saying if we actually get a message saying hi from WhatsApp, the bot has to respond with something. So what is the bot going to respond with? We actually now use the messaging response. So in order to prevent us from writing the full messaging response here, we've actually assigned it to a variable so that we can actually make use of the variable response here. So what you're going to do now is actually say response for response here. Sorry, I did it by mistake. So saying response dot, so this response parameter actually have a function called message. So say response dot message, and then we have to pass in the message in the form of a string. So how do we define a string? We put double quotes or single quotes. So double quotes, hi, you messaged. So this is what we want our bot to respond with, hi, you messaged. So basically this won't return anything, for example, to WhatsApp, but we actually have to return this response. We actually have to return it so that to the user, so that the user can actually save the response. And then we have to start. So we write return with this a WhatsApp function, and then string, sort of like str, which actually represents string. So we want to return it as a string. What do you want to return as a string? So it will require arguments. So we want to return the response. Okay, I know this may be overwhelming, you may be hitting your head hard, maybe on the floor or on a wall, but we'll actually explain all the nitty-gritty stuff so that you may understand it better. Okay, so what do we do in order to run our server? So Flask, you just say Flask run. This is all under in the documentation. When you want to run an application, you just type Flask run. So caution, if you actually named your application other than app.py, first of all you actually have to set an environment for it. Maybe you've named it maybe name.py or main.py. What you actually have to do is actually copy this code here, as you can see. Maybe it's actually hello.py or something like that. So just say, as it returns, set Flask underscore app is equals to the name of app, maybe main.py or maybe name.py, just depends on what you have actually set it to. Then you can now run the server and see if it's running. So let's check if we didn't actually make any errors. So let's type Flask run and we'll see what happens. Okay, so our server is actually running. So as you can see, it's actually running on local hosts, which is 127.0.0.1, and then on port 5000. So now in order to make our app online, we actually need to forward this port to an online server. So what you're going to do is actually use Ngrok. So now fire up your terminal and open Ngrok. So remember